Greetings. It's been a while. It seems like I do a lot of genealogy between the videos, and so I start kind of missing doing the videos. But anyway, so kind of a fun one today. So I haven't really said a lot about my great grandfather and my great grandmother. Um, although by the time I tell you enough about them, you'll see that they were very busy. Um, when I went to Hamilton, where they had a farm, and I stood on their farm and kind of surveyed around the area. They weren't too far from the city of Hamilton, but back then it would have been smaller. And he had was born in Kentucky, and then he came through Missouri, and they thought I think they really thought they might stay in Missouri, and they had a couple kids when they were still out there. And then, something was Montana was, if you could make it to Montana, there was like a lot of available land. There was successful people making money in a lot of different ways compared to some of the more Midwest towns that were just flat and farmed. So anyway, so they took the few kids that they'd had, and then they went to Montana and settled around that area. Now he did like it was an interesting community because like he had a farm, and to be honest, I don't know exactly what all he was growing, but there was a miscellaneous amount of um, enough products that there actually was they were being trucked outside of Hamilton area. And I know that one of the sons actually set up a business where he was had a truck, and he was actually taking eggs and milk and something else maybe, but he started out kind of like he started out at the dairy with the ice cream dairy, and then he saw this opportunity, and so he had the truck. So I'm very interested in always what do they grow, what do they eat. So when I'm traveling, sometimes I just have to stop and go and check it out really closely. I remember the strangest thing I found was when the hops out in um, Idaho, kind of really stymied me. I didn't figure out for a while what they were, but basically, there was the mines. There was a lot of mining going on, and so a lot of the people in that area were not very far away from the mines. And then they also talked, and I thought this was interesting. They talked about movable mills, so they would have everything they needed, kind of like to complete a small meal, and it, a saw and whatever they needed. And so they actually would move it to where the trees were, and so they were really taking down trees. And there was lots of trees when they first got to Montana, and I think now it's a combination. I don't know how much they've replanted the trees, but that was so he actually took part in that, along then with his yard, and he was very he was well known in the community, and it was small enough that there was always somebody having a baby shower or a wedding or a funeral, or and they really did. It was a very close community. Now he evidently, when he was up doing some logging, he got bit by a Rocky Mountain tick, and I'd kind of heard about that when I was growing up, and we were taught that if a tick bit us and it was hanging there, that we really needed to be very careful how it was taken out. But I don't remember. I mean, I remember, people were dying from tick bites. I do remember that as a child. But he actually did die, and it was the Rocky Mountain um, tick fever, they called it, and it was all over. And when I was out there visiting, I know with cousins that I have learned, genealogy, people that I met for the first time. Sherry, who's a little younger than I am, she said as we were driving along that the tick situation was so bad that they actually created a vaccination, and in that area where she was going to school, she had to have a vaccination against the tick bite So I don't know what the problem is now, with it. I don't know if you hear about it. It's like sort of when I got polio before the vaccine came out, and then eventually it, was eradicated. And so that could have happened with the ticks. I'm not sure, but so he died. He was not he was not a really too old of a guy. He was still active in his prime, and and but within 17 years, my great grandmother had 11 kids, 11 healthy kids. And so, needless to say, they were pretty busy, between making a living, between growing enough food and surviving. And it sounded like, and the kids all, um, they were successful in their endeavors, and then there was kind of that whole movement thing for a lot of them to go further west, and so some of them would go in pairs or three families or something like that. So I know I was on the west coast, and so I got to meet a lot of those people because of that, because they would populate a certain area. Now these would have been my mother's aunts and uncles, but she was an only child. And so they were pretty well, in that older age bracket, probably old like me now. And so, they were gone before I really got interested in genealogy for sure. And, I remember seeing them, but, come and go, but it was always interesting to me that there was those people. But as I would, have slowly worked through these 11 kids, um, there were the ones that stayed. And actually, I think a few of the ones that stayed were the ones that were born in Missouri. So, when you think about families that size, I know from my own experience listening to stories about families who have, even like 10 kids or more, the older ones kind of have to take care of the younger ones, and it kind of works its way down. Now, my grandfather, Roy, he was the youngest of those kids. And so by the time, you know, he left and when he was kind of, they were all like free-spirited people because that was the community. And so there was a lot of activities, like rodeos and celebration days. There was always something, it seemed like, when I was out there. Even I noticed that they were very into their small community still and having these events, and, very social compared to, like, I'm in Denver right now. It's like, you're going to do, I don't even see the neighbors, let alone, of course, after the pandemic, it's a little bit better, but still, it's, you don't think about a community the size where I'm living, having an event for the families. So that was really interesting to me, when I actually today I had been working. Well, I've been working. I went back to the Allnuts, so I did Roy Allnutt in a different video. I did Zella, and I did Alice. And you might want to go back. I know there's a lot of you new signing up, which and some people, more people subscribing, so they get my it ends up, it might be a weekly thing if I get them sooner than that. But I was still doing genealogy, my own genealogy, to put this all together for you and into a video. And sometimes, not that people live ordinary lives and they might not necessarily get, to be in my video. I don't know how I might end up choosing who's who in the zoo, when there's 11 kids, and then I've already did, larger families than that. But so I'm still like pegging, getting along in that vein. And so the other thing was, there was a um, Pearl. Her name was Pearl. And I heard that name when I was growing up, but I never put two and two together and how that fit in. But you'll see as we go along, it does definitely fit in. So Pearl Elizabeth Allnutt was one of the older daughters, not the oldest daughter, but she was older. And then her older sister Lillian, she died about when she was 29, and she'd been sick for 4 years. Now, I haven't found a lot of deaths, in those younger years. Most of these people lived, and they lived to be 80 or 90 years old. And, like I don't know, maybe the cold weather agreed with them or made them hardier, but they were very, long living people. But she did pass when she was 49, and so then Pearl took Lillian's daughter, and I noticed I had this extra child on on the census report. And I think I mentioned in one of my videos before that if you're doing the genealogy in ancestry.com, they have you can look at the actual true picture of the census, or you can click on another button and they'll give you this typewritten, because sometimes it's hard to read the census reports. But that little girl didn't show up on that other one. It was only on the true. So I was able to figure out, so she was a niece. And so there was several years that, every 10 years she was on there as a niece. And so she was living with Pearl. So I always thought of Pearl being this, kind of giving type person. And so today's, a lot of it is going to be uh, about Pearl and one of her first son, Millard. And his name was he was a Dunbar. Excuse me. And I have a book from up there in the Bitterroot Valley, which incorporates all these little towns along the road that all was, very close to Hamilton. And when I was there, and my cousins took me out, they showed me, where all these additional smaller ones, because there was um, graveyards, cemeteries to go and visit. And so they gave me a full tour, which was fantastic. I mean, I'm kind of used to traveling by myself, but it's great when you have the people that actually grew up there and know, more about the community. So Pearl had a son, and everybody. It's interesting, even in ancestry, a lot of people are making sure that everybody knows that this was Scotty, and he didn't go by Millard, and so, and Scotty was a horse person, and he was the oldest of Pearl's sons. Now, his obituary, in fact, it was just on and on and on. He raised purebred horses, he trained horses, he trained people how to ride horses. There was a very big deal about the horses. I don't know if it was the climate that the horses were what was good for them as far as, but there's very a lot of horse racing going on up there. And he evidently was small enough that guy that he actually did some, he was a jockey. But in his obituary, it said that he was known as Scotty Dunbar, and he went all over Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and he loved his horses. And so when I was visiting with my cousins at their house in Salmon, which is not very far from Hamilton, it's just kind of over the mountain. You come down, you're actually in Idaho when you go into Salmon, but it's a beautiful, beautiful area up there. Hunting, fishing, all that. People, you know, love that part of the whole area between Montana and like Salmon, as far as during summer, winter sports, whatever. People that you can. There's all kinds of animals to shoot and fish to catch and stuff like that. And so, but they're very isolated. These two cousins that I met with, um, we went into the next little town from Hamilton north, and they were so happy to go into, like, it was a one of those old fashioned Kmart, Kmart, not like anyway, it was a variety store. And they would have had to have driven 3 hours to go to Missoula north, or 3 hours to go south down to Idaho Falls, to be able to really shop. And so they were all happy. They were running around with their baskets. It was really fascinating, but in those situations, you're pretty isolated out from, you have to kind of know what you're doing and how to store your food, and how to they did a lot of canning and drying, and a lot of self-sufficiency type things also. So then and Millard was, when I went to their house, they showed me pictures, and it was just it was him and horses a lot, and he was a very favorite of the family, to them. And so they showed me all these different family pictures and took some copies of them and sent me. And I still communicate with the younger, Tracy's her name, Dunbar, and she's married to somebody now that works up in, I think, one of the mines up actually in Salmon. Um, so that was kind of enlightening. Now, I had kind of heard something about this Millard situation, but it was interesting because I've talked more with Stacy over the years, and then she sent me a email not very long ago because we keep talking about this, but it was real interesting. So then so Scotty's brother had a son and his name was um, Curtis Lee Dunbar. Now, so then he married Sherry, and then Sherry had two daughters. So these are the people that now, because I contacted them and traveled there and ate dinner with them and spent time with them, we're really, I feel like, they're probably closer cousins to me, because they're closer to my age also, um, than I have because of my mom and dad being only children. I have my brother and my sister. And so anyway, so Curtis Lee, their dad, Tracy's dad, um, died. He got some kind of cancer. He was kind of more into, it sounded like, the things that were going on in the Forest Service, and it's kind of like conservation, and then he transferred up to salmon, and then he ended up getting cancer and he died. And I'm not laughing. It's just kind of, I'm not laughing that he got cancer, but then what happens next is like, so they're at his funeral, and a man comes up to Tracy and says, my name is John, and I'm a cousin, and I don't know if you knew, but Millard was not a Dunbar, and that his father was somebody else. And then he just kind of, and they were in shock. They were in total shock. And so then they started kind of, they've done a lot of searching, a lot of talking to the old timers that were around. Some seem to kind of have heard of something that would happen like that. And I guess even her dad, Tracy's dad, had said he didn't know if he should talk to Millard about it, or Scotty about it, because he didn't know if Scotty knew. So we don't know if Scotty knew. We don't know if, yeah, we don't, there's a lot of missing places. And so when she wrote me this email not very long ago, she really laid it out. And then so I finally feel like now this last week, I just had all this, everything to do with the Dunbars and with Pearl. So I have to say something kind of interesting about Pearl. I was up several years ago at my sister's house, and there's this beautiful plate on her um, wall, and I commented about it, and she took it down and showed me, and on the back, it was a plate that Pearl had given to her daughter Virginia, and Virginia had given to my sister. Now, well, there's more to come on Virginia. But anyway, so even though we didn't know each other, it's and then plus Tracy looks just like my niece. I mean, it was kind of weird when we finally met and everything. So in this email, there was this part of it, this was in 2004, I think, when the man came up, and then um, somehow Dr. Smith. So somehow somebody said it was Dr. Smith was the father, but he was married and he moved away, and not in the, and not, it was not a he was not a Dunbar. Um, and then at that point he practiced in Corvallis, which is just in little ways, one of those towns, a little ways, you can almost see them if, throw a stone and you could, they're really close, but it's just another little community there. And I think it was there where there was this huge building, a really new building, and it was a horse arena, so they're still going. I mean, these horses are a big thing up in that area. Um, yeah, so oh, I know what I wanted to say. So, I mean, this can be upsetting to some people, and I know that sometimes people are surprised, but this is what Tracy said to me. She said, so needless to say, it has been looking for a needle in a haystack, but it keeps things intriguing. So evidently she's still looking for, and of all names, Dr. Smith, but she's coming along and she's, kind of, I don't think some of these people, well, who knows if Dr. Smith even knew, I mean, you have to kind of open it up wide and give everybody the benefit of the doubt of what was going on. And yeah, things happen. So, but I think she's, she hasn't, well, I think she has found him actually, kind of, but, you know, yeah. Anyway, if I get any updates on that, I'll let you know. So, the other thing was about what I said about Virginia. So, Virginia was one of Millard's sisters, and she was one that actually left, and she was very, very, very close to my grandfather, to Roy. And so she ended up out in Seattle and she got married. I think she got married in Hamilton at some point, but she ended up marrying a guy, Henry Zuba was his name. And I remember Virginia because she would have been younger, younger than some of the aunts that I met. But she also, when I think about it, it just makes me like excited and happy to have that memory of Virginia. Um, so she drove a powder blue Thunderbird. I don't know if you guys, anybody out there, I know you're all out there, but it's like I'd come home from school walking up the hill, and there would be that baby blue Thunderbird. I was so excited because I knew Virginia was there. And talk about stories she had, but most of her stories was coming from Hank. I guess they called him Hank Zuba, and he was a merchant seaman, and so he would come into one of the ports, and we were a port town that I grew up in. So, pretty isolated as far as a lot of things. I didn't know a lot of things until I moved to San Francisco and discovered a lot of different things. But that was the one way is when Virginia would come, she'd have these stories. And oh, the coolest like fabric and dolls and whatever you can think of that he would get all over the world as he was traveling. But he put her in that little blue Thunderbird so she could buzz back and forth. You could almost like, from Seattle to California to wherever. And I had today when I was thinking about that, and I did a little research before, but I thought I was going to look and see a little bit more into the merchant seaman because it seemed there. I think a lot of it happened after they were taking military guys, um, but I don't know if it had to do totally with the military as much as these guys were. He started in um, San Diego. So that's where the Marines were. But I'm thinking that in order, they listed all this criteria that you have to have. And there was navigational skills and there was safety skills and there were, um, you know, physical strength you needed. And you had to take a test. And it said that, a lot of those merchant seamen that would go and they were carrying products from country to country. So they went all over the world and it was interesting because they said that some of them made at least like could make possibly $100,000, and this was an old article. So it's like I think they're on. the ship, and then they're off for a period of time and then back on, and so they go traveling. So Virginia was in this part of my um video today, and it always, it gave me a little picture of somebody that had seen more and went more, and it kind of electrified me to the point where I was paying more attention to in school. So I think that um I know, like, sometimes I I mean, I've been a lot of places, and like, I was yesterday, I spent that day with my 2 grandchildren, and, a lot of times, there's those things that I can tell them about that they might not have seen yet, or, just keep it alive. I mean, education is great, but when you're traveling or when you're learning it from people who are traveling, it's to me, it's much broader of an education. Now, both of them had just got back from Norway, so then they're telling Grammy, what did they see in Norway and what did the food taste like in Norway? And they found stilts. They went to an older farm place. I hadn't thought about stilts in forever, but we had a nice house, and I can't say we were poor at all. We had a nice area growing up, and but my most of our toys were refurbished. I just remember that. But my dad would make stilts. And just, so I'll be curious to see if my son makes them. The kid said he's going to make them some. I mean, it's not hard, but you have to, it's a balancing act. And Grammy better not get close to it. So I want to do it. The last time I fell, I was playing kickball with my grandson. And yeah, so I try to not do crazy things like that as much. But they were telling me things, and I was getting excited about everything that they had experienced in, the time and the weather, and they had a big storm, and so it's that kind of conversation, I think, that I know it intrigues me, and I think a lot of kids get more open to it, especially if it's being passed down to them. I mean, I think that my boys actually were very educated and very well traveled. Um, and you can kind of tell the difference compared to, somebody that hasn't been totally out in the world. So I think that you know there's more and more people starting to watch my videos, which makes me very, very happy. But today I was thinking, when I first started out, who knows, it's out there really. But it's interesting because I was thinking, like, I couldn't even put 100 chairs in my apartment so everybody could sit down and we could have these discussions, and we maybe could drink tea. It's just like, don't mind me, I get a little silly. But I do enjoy having an audience. I do enjoy, um, I've always enjoyed my genealogy, but this is even making it more come alive, as far as being able to pass information, and I appreciate the comments that I've been getting, and I'm willing to share, if you're on uh, Ancestry, you can go in and look at my tree, and you can, send me a um, email, or I'm in the process of sending quite a few messages out right now that to genealogy people that may be interested in the videos, because most of the videos are people that, I mean, there's not there's so many more people on there than I know right now, but the ones that I do know, they're not into genealogy as much as they're into the storytelling and the information that they get, you know, and they enjoy, the little travel log, I guess, of what I'm doing. And I hope to, eventually get back and be able to do more um, out there in the real world. The pandemic really kind of crushed me down as far as, where I was going to be able to go. But and keeping my Mount St. Helens behind me, and the lady walked into my apartment the other day and she goes, "Oh, it looks looks like it could be anywhere in the world, you know. And I do. I have collected things that are important to me, that mean a lot to me, and so I surround myself with that. And it's not it, you know. There's some unusual, you know. There's more than just like Buddha. So, but anyway, I love you. I hope you have another uh, good week. And so, as you're leaving, if you want to subscribe, now I'm starting to even for myself understand more about subscribing. My sister was having trouble with it, and there's a place if you subscribe, then when you pull your YouTube up, that my picture should be in those first choices. So you'll be notified when I finish a video, and it will show up. And it's, you know, I see a different screen in the publishing of it. But yeah, so we'll keep, you know, the um, I think it's an easier way. It doesn't cost any money. I think sometimes people get really confused because there's other things. You can be a member, like if you want to be a member of this. I think that sometimes people want to be a member and they get special benefits. Well, I don't have everything I'm doing is free right now. And so, but it would be important to the algorithm if you did um, subscribe. And then the other thing, you know, is you can always like it and you know, send me a note. I mean, I would really enjoy like hearing from you all. And there is a place in there for comments, and I do get some comments, but yeah. Anyway, so have a good next week. Bye.